Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Krav Maga Worldwide podcast. My name is Joel Ellenbecker, and I'm here with CJ Kirk. And we're excited for another awesome podcast today where we dive into goal setting and preparing for 2025. Thanks for being here, CJ.
Yeah, I'm excited. I like this topic, and I think it's timely. I think now's the right time to start thinking about 2025 and specifically about what the people in the community want to achieve. There's lots of facets to it, so I'm excited to talk about it, dig in. We might even talk a little bit about coaching and thinking about where your goals coming from. Could be fun.
Yeah, that was actually something that was swirling around in my brain as we started talking about this topic was I think goals are awesome. And I know early on when I was setting goals, sometimes I would just set goals for the purpose of just setting goals, and there wasn't a strong why or a purpose or a reason behind it. So then it would be easy for me to fall off of those goals. So I think that might even be a great place to start is like, what is the motivation for this? Where's the goal coming from? um yeah, that's right, I think.
Yeah, some of what will be driving 2025 goals will be um, the need of the business, right? So for a licensee or even an instructor, there are probably demands that they need to address that are coming out of the business or the school or the facility. Um, and some of that will be driven by what is needed next, right? It's not just, I want to do the next thing. It's what can I monetize? What do my students want? What's something in the area potentially that I'm in that is in demand right now and will continue to be in demand. So those types of things will drive some of that thinking. But ultimately, if you think about this from a coaching perspective, a performance life coaching perspective, um, goals come from somewhere. And understanding some of the drivers or the facilitators of the desire to achieve a goal are important because you might be chasing something that isn't really good for you. I don't think that's the case necessarily um, with the courses that we, do here at Krav Maga Worldwide, whether it be a seminar, whether it be a phase or something in between, a certification of some kind. But the bigger issue is what are you doing and why? And the why is a huge question. I'll give you a quick example, and then we can talk a little bit about it. Um, if I was coaching, let's say, a 36-year-old woman who had come in and said she wanted to run a marathon, I'd ask her a bunch of questions as part of the intake process. Some of the questions would be focused around has she run before? When did her interest in running peak? What does she expect to get from her goal if she achieves it? What does she expect to get from her goal if she, uh, for some reason, can't pursue it at the last minute? Um, what was her background like growing up? Was she in sports? Did she run track or cross country in high school or middle school? To get a broad understanding of how she grew up and um, what kind of relationship she had as a younger person. If I found in this person that she didn't like running, that she wasn't involved with team sports, um, and that there's nothing in her history that would indicate that this would come up. But I also found out that her father was a avid marathon runner and had passed away 6 months earlier. Um, there might be some connections there. And this person might be in a situation where she's trying to connect with her father or heal a relationship by running a marathon. Imagine the disappointment of achieving a goal that really had a powerful, unseen, sort of implicit goal that couldn't possibly be achieved. So when it's achieved, there's a sense of um, almost mourning and not jubilation. And those types of things in our background are really important to understand um, if they're playing a role in the goals we select.
Yeah, and what I hear there is, this example of a woman running a marathon is if she is connected to and clear on the purpose or the motivating factors behind running that marathon and what she could get or feel from it, that she could run the marathon and be empowered and excited and that could drive her forward to, whatever next progress in her life. Or if she's not connected to it, she could run that marathon and it could be a great achievement and she could still feel like garbage about it.
Yeah, obviously, if you're trying to heal a relationship that can't be healed by running a marathon, there's a sense of a letdown when there should be joy. Um, and having someone talk through that with you and make those connections and ask you some powerful questions really helps people to shape their goal. If this woman sits down and she goes, "Oh, I didn't realize," but now that we're talking about it, there's probably a connection here. And she may say, like, "I want to choose a different goal," or we may say, "Let's talk about our expectations around the goal," right? Um, and even resetting expectations can make a goal that would have been achieved yet sort of disastrous can make it a much more powerful process to work through and uh, to allow someone to um, find some joy and some relief and some achievement in what they're doing and achieving.
And I think, the example of running a marathon is one that people can understand and relate to. And I think this also translates to, why does somebody as a student in Krav Maga sign up to come to classes? Why do they want to progress through the levels? Or why does an instructor want to become an instructor and get certified? Or a school owner opening up their school? And every step or goal along the way in our realm as well.
I think that's true. It's actually pretty important, I think, that um, the person doing sales in the school, understand this process and this concept as well.
This was ac this was something that we were actually just discussing at my school, Fortitude, was the idea of trying to have our students get the experience or a experience like the ones that we had. And I think, for me, I'm an anomaly. I started martial arts when I was 7 or 8, and I'm still, at 33, still doing it. That's not gonna be the everybody experience. But if somebody can train for a period of time, 3 or 5 years, I don't know exactly what the magic number is, but if they can really immerse themselves in it, then they're gonna be able to gain that skill, and I think it's gonna have a much more profound impact on their life rather than, like, there's clearly a reason that they come and they wanna sign up and they wanna start training, and then if they don't really get connected to the community, they don't really have their goals clearly set, and they start to stumble and then they fall off and, maybe they hang on because they're in an agreement or they're on a membership, but they don't really come to the classes. I think that that's a problem and a struggle for school owners and for students around the country is like there's clearly a reason why they're doing it, but maybe they're not connected enough to that, or they don't have the milestones and the mini goals set up that are going to help keep them on that path and keep them successful.
Yeah, we had a conversation that was a little bit similar to this in our last, what we call this edition or installment. But I think one of the things that would be powerful for people to do at schools once somebody signs up, going in after that, having a dedicated 20 or 30-minute session where um, the new student has the opportunity to sit down with someone that has the knowledge of the school and allow them to be able to essentially work through a goals session. So today, when we talk about, one of the easy ways to think about goals is the acronym SMART, and we'll talk some about that today. Um, but to allow a student to come in and say, "Okay, I've signed up. I signed up for a specific reason, but I also have, some fuzzy idea about where this might go. to be able to facilitate a conversation with the student, and sort of co-create goals based on what you can offer them could be a powerful way to um, increase retention. And if you put it on the front end and you have those conversations even before the student joins, might even increase your the ratio of students to join, or leads, or increase your sales essentially. And I think um, the process would be very similar to the type of thing we're going to get into today.
Yeah, I think that's powerful. And I think having it clear at the front end and really partnering and coming alongside a member or a student, or even applying this to someone who wants to go down the instructor path of understanding that motivation and having that be clear for them. I think that really sets the sail, as so to say.
Yeah. So there's different conversations. There's a conversation with a new student or a prospective student. There's conversations that licensees have with instructors or would be instructors. Um, and then there's just us personally thinking about it from the perspective of either teaching in a school, or owning and teaching in a school, trying to think about what am I going to do for 2025? What can I do with my time and attention, which is which is what we have, um, that will optimize my results. And I don't know what results people are looking for. Maybe it's more students, or it's to monetize something, or it's to increase their capacity to be a powerful teacher. Those are all criteria that people need to work for themselves. But yeah, it's I think it's something that everybody can do and should do, and could be powerful in a number of different ways. Let's just talk about SMART for a second, and make sure everybody understands the acronym. A SMART goal is specific at the specific. So saying that I want to be the best at something, and only the best of my team at something, probably isn't specific enough. Um, so something very specific. I want to be able to run, this fast over this amount of terrain, or distance. So specific is the S. A is attainable. Wait a minute. Let me do M first. M is measurable. Um, and that means something like, okay, I want to I want to be able to measure what I'm doing to have an objective confirmation that I've achieved my goal. Right. A is attainable. So you might come to me, Joel, and say, I want to run faster. And I say, well, let's do a SMART goal. And if you say something like, I want to break the world record in the 100-meter dash, um, as much as I want to support you, that's not attainable, right? Or, I want to be able to jump, 10 feet in the air. It's not going to happen, right? From my foot to the ground. So attainable's tricky. You still want to set a stretch goal, but you just don't want to go so crazy that there's no way you can attain your goal. Where are we? SMAR. R is what? What is R? I forgot all of a sudden. You tell me what R is. It's relevant. So, at least in my book, it's relevant, which means that the goal is something that is relevant to your life, that it fits in your life, that it fits with where you're going in your life. And I think that's a really important one. A lot of times we will pick up on goals that look, look cool, but in the broader context of your life, it may not fit. It may not be something that if you do would ultimately move you forward in the way that you're living your life, assuming that's a good way to live your life. Um, T is time bound. Um, Time bound means that you give yourself a starting time and an end time, so that the goal just doesn't go on forever, right? And one of the things that I do is I add an E at the end, so like SMARTy. The E is ethos, which essentially means don't chase goals that ultimately aren't aligned with your principles, right? With your ethos. So that's not something that happens a lot, but it does happen. I do have to essentially, um, every once in a while, talk a client out of a goal by exploring with them enough powerful questions that they realize that while the goal might be something they're excited about, It's not in alignment with how they live or want to live. Um, and it's usually those two goals are usually in response to something, reacting to something. So SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time bound. It's a good way to think about how to develop a goal in general.
Yeah, I think the adding of the ethos is cool, and what I was thinking about when you said that people sometimes get on a goal in response to something is almost that idea of like shoulding on themselves. So it's like, well, this isn't going well, so I should be doing X, Y, Z. That outside pressure versus, really looking inward and being like, well, who am I? Who do I want to be about this? Like, what is the life that I want to create for myself? And having that be the bedrock of where they're choosing from and how they're starting their goals. But yeah,
Yeah,
I love smart goals.
yeah, I think you're referring to um, an idea of like someone responding to trauma or a trigger from trauma that's somehow embedded in their operating system, and they're they're responding to something that isn't particularly healthy. And if that thing that isn't healthy isn't aligned with where they're going in their life, and they're doing it just to show somebody something or to prove their worthiness, a lot of times that backfires as well. But let's talk a little bit about 2025. There's lots of stuff on the calendar for Krav Maga Worldwide. Um, how should someone who's going to come to these courses or seminars, how should they approach um, 2025? And in my view, what I would do is get the calendar out, look at the courses. Um, we're going to do addition by subtraction in the sense that you put all the courses on the calendar, and then you look at what you're doing with your school and your personal life. You start taking things off that are not lines in the sand for you, and you see what's left. And again, what's left should all be things that are relevant for you. And if you took something off that is relevant, that's a negotiation you have to have with yourself. But when you think about what's left, what's the highest of value for you? Are you looking for a balanced approach? Because you want to push yourself forward in the system. You want to become a better instructor. You want to gain some rank, but you also want your instructors or fellow instructors or to benefit as well. Their students to benefit depending on what role you're playing. And a lot of times, what happens is people think about their goals, and our goals have to be evaluated, particularly in Krav Maga, from a number of different perspectives. One is, what is this doing for me? Another one is, what is this doing for the school or my instructor cadre? And another one is, what is this doing for the students? Um, if you have a goal that's sort of just for you or just for the students, you can sometimes lose sight of um, what might be thought of as a balanced approach, because you are in a community. You're not doing this alone, and you're responsible to a community of people to deliver on a number of different fronts when you're an instructor. So thinking through things like that, what are your criteria? Why are your criteria what your criteria are? And I go so far sometimes as to weight my criteria. WEIGHT, weight it, so that um, I'm able to look at from an objective standpoint what what the permutations are in terms of what I can attend and when I can attend it, and what the various um, calendars might look like based on um, a weighted criteria. So I don't know if you've ever done something like that, but it's helpful to me.
Yeah, I think with, um the system and the courses that we have going on, I think there's a lot of opportunity for licensees and instructors to grow. And, even just from my own experience over this last year, being able to really pick things that, like the SMART goal set, are relevant to me. Or even like when I read a book, I'm typically not just reading books all the time because people recommend them or because they're a good book to read. I try to pick and read books that are going to help me with whatever situation or problem or challenge or opportunity I have in my life is. So I think that that could be a good approach for the courses too. There was a lot of really great feedback and reception and growth from our courage coaching cadre this year. And so if coaching, or understanding the background motivations, or even just getting a deeper understanding of self is important, like that might be somewhere to look for instructors. Or just kind of looking at each one of the different opportunities and being like, well, like you said, how is this going to help the three buckets? And like, how is this going to move my community forward this year?
Yeah, one of the things that strikes me when we talk about this is, um, it really depends on where you are in your own evolution. You might start out with something that's heavily self-focused as a more um, a younger instructor, right? Or a less advanced instructor. Um, and the balance, the criteria, the weights and balance you create shift as you move through the system, right? The other thing you might want to think about is, am I doing things that complement what I'm doing? So you mentioned coaching, and coaching's been really fun, and I think um, people have really put themselves into it. I think they're finding um, that it's applicable in a bunch of different ways. I know we have some coaching candidates that are um, starting groups to coach, coach groups within the school. Some of them are using coaching in their staff meetings, um, where they've struggled in the past. A lot of them are using it as a monetization tool for one-on-one coaching. Um, Several of them have said, "I'm just a better instructor now on the mat because I understand that I can ask questions and understand different perspectives and respond to them in a more powerful and productive way." So coaching is one. It's connected to what you do, um, and it makes you better in all those aspects of being let's say, a school owner or instructor. Um, we have the handgun certification, which went really well. It's not directly tied to the curriculum, but is it something that someone out there might feel is a powerful enough connection to the curriculum that they decide they want to pursue that? Um,
And I think for
that
me too, coming up through the system as somebody who didn't grow up around guns at all, didn't really have any experience with that, but had a lot of, hand to hand experience. Um, I had instructors tell me earlier on, like, "Hey, you need to go to a range. You need to learn how to, you need to learn how to shoot. Like if you're going to be teaching people how to take weapons away or disarm, like you have to understand how the weapon functions." So I think it's such a cool opportunity that now, the instructors coming up through the system, or instructors in our group, don't have to necessarily go elsewhere. And the material and the things that were brought there, and the feedback we got from the participants, that they said it was some of the best like shooting courses they've ever attended. So I think that's really positive.
yeah, I think the thing that we want to rely on is that when the stuff is it being taught in accordance with the principles of Krav Maga? Because you don't want to stray from the principles. You want to understand how they can be expressed in different domains.
And there's a lot of time and attention that it's taken for me in multiple realms of the business. Like, I've had generic business coaches at times where they give me, information or resources, and then I have to kind of deconstruct them and reconstruct them to have it make sense in my Krav Maga business. And I think that's kind of a similar thing with shooting. Like, there's probably lots of different, methodologies and thinkings and teaching for shooting, and to me, it seems like you've already done that work to disseminate it and make it make sense with Krav Maga, so that it can be applied and integrated more seamlessly, and it can be used as a revenue generator more seamlessly, rather than our licensees or instructors have to go figure out all that on their own.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we should say out loud, if I think people know it, but when you are a Krav Maga instructor and you have a relationship with a student, a trust relationship, they tend to trust you to teach them things that are related to Krav Maga, whether it be um, shooting a handgun, or whether it be coaching them through something. Ironically, it's a lot like being a personal trainer in the sense that you show expertise in one domain, and your client or your student thinks you have expertise, all over the place. In this case, we're talking about expertise that are related to either the curriculum or the expression of the principles in a different context of violence or um, in mindset work to get ready to face violence. So it's all connected. And this podcast is interesting in terms of goals because we keep referring to other concepts we talked about. What we're really doing when we put these classes, these certifications, these phases on our calendar, what we're really doing is we're saying in the following year, the coming year, 2025, this is what I want to achieve. And this is how these things fit into the ongoing story um, that I can tell that allow people to trust me to teach them in these areas, right? So going back to the idea of telling stories, it's a different context, obviously, now, but it's really, if you're struggling with what am I going to do next year? I see one class or one certification or one phase I want to go to. Maybe one of the questions you ask yourself is, do these other classes, certifications, etc., do they fit powerfully into the ongoing story of my Krav Maga school or my capacity as an instructor? Um, and if that's the way you think in terms, a lot of people do think in terms of the story. Where do these certifications, where do these phases fit in your ongoing story? I think that's a great way to think about it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that to your point about students trusting us to teach them or show them things in other domains that are related, I think it's a responsibility for us as leaders to be trained and be knowledgeable in those adjacent things so that we can support them. And if we don't have that knowledge, then obviously referring them out. But I think that's what's really incredible about the opportunities that we're creating is to have that relevant knowledge and be able to become certified on it and know what we're talking about and being able to share that with others.
Yeah, I think anything you do that inhibits the trust relationship or goes in a direction that is not contextualized to the story you're telling in your life, so to speak. I think that is something you have to think twice about. But we've got a bunch of stuff going on for 2025. I think did we release the calendar yet?
Yep, the calendar's out there, and even something that we've been discussing lately too, with like our basic civilian law enforcement certification. Um, having law enforcement officers in our classes, for me has been one of the most rewarding and incredible things to be able to empower them to be safer because I have way more stories of my law enforcement students using Krav Maga and going home safe than I do of any of my civilian students. So I think getting the training and the understanding in that realm is really important too. We also have our seminar coming up in March, which I think is going to be an incredible opportunity for people to train with and work with you and John Pascal, and there's a lot of really awesome stuff coming.
When you mentioned the seminar, a couple things popped. Um, but I'm also really interested in knowing, when we're talking about our our community of instructors and licensees, it would be great to know from them if there are courses or certifications that they're particularly interested in and why. So I would certainly put that out there for anybody that's listening. If there's something that you feel is highly relevant and it's something that we can bring you, I'd be very interested to understand what that is. I think places in the country, cities and towns, they're a little bit different. Um, and for you, like you might have your hand on the pulse of what's going on in Nina, right? Because there's 15 people there, right? 20, there's 20 up to 20 up.
We're growing, yeah.
You're growing, yeah. What is the population of Nina? Is it like 30,000?
Yeah, we're about 30,000, and then we're squished between Appleton and Oshkosh is a college town. So I think there's like 110,000. So, we've got a bigger, not quite a Houston population, but we're a smaller town with a couple slightly larger towns nearby.
Yeah, yeah. Houston's a lot bigger, obviously. Um, and just areas of the country. Like you had said, for instance, that um, you'd never trained with a gun before, you're way up in the sort of the Midwest. No, you're in the Northwest. No, you're in Canada is where you are, essentially, right?
We're close, yeah.
So essentially being from Canada, um, I think you told me you never even saw a picture of a gun until you were like 20, right?
Well, I mean, I think I'm also just an anomaly for my area because there's a lot. I mean, I think someone just said the other day we've got opening weekend coming for deer hunting, and
Um,
Wisconsin's one of the the largest hunting states in the United States. So it just happened to be my life experience that I wasn't around guns much, and then I started to get to expert where I'm learning how to disarm guns. I just felt uncomfortable. So doing a course there went a long way for me.
yeah. All right. So I'm not gonna bag on the gun thing anymore. Um, I actually grew up in Ohio, so not too far from you. At least when I was a young kid. Moved to Mississippi. Ended up going to college in Texas, stayed in Texas. And it's kind of anomaly here if you don't own a bunch of guns. I mean, I say that, but it's maybe 50-50. It's a big city, but having a gun here is not an unusual thing. And so you juxtapose that to say, New York City or some places.
Chicago.
Yeah, well, there's lots of guns in Chicago that I'm registered, right? The serial numbers are all filed off. But the point being that it's unusual. It's unusual because of a combination of uh, cultural sort of influence, law, local laws, etc. Um, but that doesn't mean um, that if you're a Krav Maga instructor, that you shouldn't have some knowledge in how to talk to somebody about, for instance, a handgun. If you're teaching them to disarm a handgun, one of the craziest things I saw and was really impacted by um, early on in a video was a guy who had um, in training, in a promotional video, he'd taken a handgun. I think it was handgun front. He'd taken a handgun, and then instead of smacking and racking and kind of grabbing the gun properly and toe healing away, um, he grabbed the gun. He held it in a way like he grabbed the front of the gun with his left hand and surrounded the frame and the slide and barrel. Um, and it was apparent to anyone who's ever held a gun, he had no idea what to do with the handgun. And I think that truly creates additional danger for the person who's disarming the handgun, right? If you take my handgun, and I'm an aggressive person, and you're holding it like you don't know how to use it, you may create a situation where someone's coming back for a second swipe.
Yeah, and
So, yeah, go.
there's a subset of, instructors who are going from that green belt area to blue belt, and they're learning handgun disarms for the first time, and maybe they don't have any, training with weapons where they look really explosive and aggressive and, everything is on point, and then as soon as they take that gun away and they're holding on to it, it's almost like their body language changes and they look afraid or timid or they're holding it in all sorts of different ways, so yeah, I think it's really important. And to circle back to your point about different topics being more relevant in different areas of the country, different areas of the world. I think one thing that we've really ramped up this year that I'm excited about is hearing feedback, opening up avenues of communication to get that feedback. And I would say every week I'm talking to at least one of our licensees or instructors and hearing them out, and then bringing that to the team to implement those types of things. So if there are courses or relevant topics or things that our listeners out there are looking to see, like please, you can email me right at joel@kravmaga.com or reach out to us on our Discord community. There's lots of different avenues to be heard and to get those things implemented.
Yeah. So, um, circling back to goals, we're sort of in a rabbit hole conversation there, but I think it's important to think about what's contextually relevant to the story you're telling. What are your needs for the year, um, particularly around monetization? We keep hammering that, but the truth is, if our facilities aren't successful financially, they can't grow, they can't create more instructors, they can't support the community, they can't do the things that we really are here to do. And so, in fact, I did um, a sales coaching session with a group a couple years ago in the western part of the country, and we were in a conference room, and the sales manager happened to be a woman. Um, said, I don't think we should raise prices." And I said, "Okay, talk to me about that because there's some economic realities around price elasticity and price sensitivity. So I want to understand that. But this is an expensive place to live, right? The cost of living there was such that raising prices would be commensurate with where they are in the country. And she told me that um, sometimes people couldn't afford the membership, and she felt bad about that. And I said, "Well, do you have a conversation with them about priorities? Maybe they could afford it, but they have to cut some things out." And as a last ditch effort, maybe that's the conversation you have. Like, how important is this to you, really? She said, "Well, I don't do that, but what's more important to me is that we stay at a price point where most people can afford it." And she says, "I hate to turn people away." And I said, "Well, if you stay at that price point and the underlying uh, budget expenses rise in the organization, it becomes an economic problem. So if you price yourself out of business, that's a bad way to do things, right?" Um, Conversely, if you have higher prices and you have flexibility in your business, you can create scholarships. You can do things to support the ideas that you want to support. Um, but the economic realities have to be they have to be addressed first. And I think it's something that people are keenly aware of now because of the impact of COVID and the ongoing sort of hangover from COVID. Most schools have not recovered to the point that they were prior to 2020. And so my my advice to people um, is what you're doing in 2025 going to create a significant monetization opportunity? And there's probably three quarters of that would be um, more share of wallet, which means more money for different services from the same student population, or um, and, and that also includes new students, right? So essentially, new business, and then retention's a big thing we don't talk about a lot. Increasing retention by a month or 2 months on average in the student population makes a huge difference. So creating opportunities for people to do new things that are interesting to them not only can create a share of wallet opportunity, but also a retention opportunity. So really thinking through those things and really understanding them, putting pen to paper, so to speak, Excel spreadsheet, and thinking about what's possible and being intentional about this is what I'm doing, this is why I'm doing it, and this is my expectation around this particular pursuit. I think is really an important conversation people need to have with themselves around prioritizing time and attention in 2025.
Yeah, and I think, we have licensees and instructors that are all across the board. We've, people who've been in the system quite a long time, third, fourth degree black belt, school owners, and we have people who are just getting started, phase A and B. And I know for my experience and my journey, the first priority was getting to a place where I could start to teach the things that Krav Maga does really well and is really unique in, weapon defenses and multiple attacker situations. And that takes a few levels to get under our belt so that we have the foundation for it. So if people are looking for a place to start and they're newer in the system, the cadence that I did was at least one course a year moving forward. And I know some people go a little faster or a little bit slower, but that seemed to work out well for me. Getting that feedback and not having too long in between so that skills don't like deteriorate.
Yeah, I was thinking about while you're talking, I was thinking about your law enforcement comment earlier. Like I've gone through the basic and advanced law enforcement curriculum with John, a millennium ago, and I guess they did some cool repelling stuff after I went through, so I missed the fun stuff. But I love the stuff that we did. We did get to take a bite from a dog and get tasered and a few other things that were fun to watch other people do. Um, that's something that I think people should put on their radar, and it might not be the highest priority, but the kind of credibility that that training offers someone to be able to say in a class, "We're doing it this way." Now, if you're a law enforcement officer, you might have um, a force continuum to contend with, and that could change the way you do this. But you have this particular threat, you're addressing it this way, you're applying the principles this way, and your job is to fight until you believe that the threat is no longer a threat, um, and to be able to articulate that later, and to have those conversations, even with civilians in a classroom, creates a ton of credibility. So you might not be monetizing the course directly, but the credibility that you build around yourself and around your instructors and around your students and therefore the community is pretty significant, pretty significant. And I've had people flat out ask me in classes, is this the way, a SWAT team would do it? Is this the way a police officer would do it? Or is this the way a soldier would do it? And one of the conversations you have is, well, you know, being a police officer and being a soldier are in a lot of ways very different. And talk about the use of force continuum, for instance. Those are short conversations you can have that really. So there's the continuum, there's rules of engagement, and for a civilian, there's just make it safe, create
Yeah.
safety for yourself, right? I think that's an important credibility builder, and there's always insight in every course that you successfully kind of navigate that you leave with that creates a situation where you become a better instructor. So for everybody out there looking at the 2025 calendar, there's so many criteria you could come up with um, to bolster credibility, um, to find ways to monetize, to connect to skills that are adjacent, Krav adjacent. That's a new term. That are It's not a term I'd use. Just forgive me, everyone. They're Krav adjacent, right? Um, but all those things will impact the way that you teach and the way that you deliver information and your capacity to support your community and your students um, in ways that if designed properly to fit into the story would be powerful.
Yeah, I think that is powerful, and I think going back to what we started with, and the place to start is finding that those motivating factors, checking in with our ethos, and taking a look at the calendar, and then I think it goes another step too, where it's planning for a course or a certification might be a bigger goal, and then there's mini goals and there's a timeline of preparation and milestones and things that can be set up beforehand. And all of that goes into making the experience not only more successful, but more enjoyable as well, being prepared and training for and ready to. And also coming with an intention of like, well, what am I really looking to get out of this? And how am I bringing this back to my community?
Yeah, and it's not one thing, right? The handgun course we did this summer was attended. I would say at least 75% of the guys that attended, it was all guys this time, were I think second or third degree black belts, and they were curious as to how or if there was a method of shooting that followed Krav Maga principles. And of course, of course, we would build it that way. So, um, but it's not just the method; it's the entire approach, right? To self defense with a handgun, um, and that would come from situational awareness. It would go further into the way that you grip the gun, the way that you present the gun, why you do it that way, um, solving some of the um, let's use the word dangers um, of gripping the gun improperly and creating additional danger for yourself based on a poor presentation, um, by ignoring the known issues of presenting a handgun, right? Like if you look at the data and you look at, when there's an exchange of gunfire, when somebody's shooting you, the preponderance of the time, I think 85%, you're within 12 feet. And the majority of the bullets never find their mark. And you're like, well, we got to break that down. We got to figure that out. And so there's some stress issues to be resolved there. Um, and you think about, okay, well, what are some of the other issues associated with hitting your mark outside of stress and adrenaline and um, cortisol and all the other um, chemicals that are dumped into your system? Um, you know, am I going to look at my sights? No, my instinctive response will be to look at the threat. Okay, well, why don't we train to look at our sights then? Like what? So just by using a Krav Maga model and principles for even running through a list of questions to make sure that what we're doing makes sense and identifying where all the dangers are. Where are we creating danger on purpose? And being able to identify those things and mitigate those things is super important. And I say all that to say that the feedback was, I think, very, very positive. We had one guy. I won't uh, I won't say his full name. It's H Shaw, but he even made T-shirts and sent me some. Was pretty cool.
That's
And I,
awesome.
I think, yeah, and he told me before we started, he said, "Look, I want to see what you're doing, and I want to see if you've been able to um, connect with, apply the principles of Krav Maga in this process." I said, "Great, let's get into it." And I'm happy to report that he saw that the principles were in place and that he actually shot really well. I mean, everybody shot really well. So um, there's so many ways to attack what your 2025 calendar will look like, and ultimately that's up to each person. But I strongly suggest they use sort of the SMARTy analogy. They think about it in the terms of writing a story and where they want their story to go, so that they can tell that story to their students and to prospective students, um, and use criteria that support that story in a way that's really powerful. If we can do those basic things and not just get ahead of ourselves, then I would be the guy that put almost everything on the counter and go, okay, I have to take one thing off, right? It's like, no, you don't want to be training for a phase and then have two certifications interrupt your training to the point that you don't feel ready for the phase, for instance. So there's a balance there. Um, but in 2025, I want to encourage everybody, get the calendar out, look at what's possible, create your criteria, tell your story, um, and prepare before January 1st. Know what it looks like. Know what it looks like before January 1st. That's my best advice.
Yeah, I think that's great, CJ. And I really enjoyed this conversation. I also think that 2025 is going to be an incredible year for Krav Maga, and I'm really excited for everything that we've got going on, everything that Krav Maga Worldwide has going on, and to see a lot of the people, a lot of the listeners on the mat. I just had the first time the other day, someone at Fortitude came up to me and they're like, "Hey, are you the guy from that podcast?" So it's cool to hear that people are listening, and I'm excited to meet more people in person and train with them.
Yeah, yeah. Are we done? Is it over?
Sounds good. Yep.
All right. How do we say goodbye? You ever seen a movie where people try to say goodbye and they handshake and then they pull their hand away and they try to hug and they like
You just gotta come
cowboys
to the
off?
Midwest.
They're
There's
they're
no
not in the rhythm. Well, I didn't know it was deer season. Can you hook me up with a deer hunt?
oh, I might have to, yeah.
Have you ever had backstrap?
Yes, yes. Yeah, it's amazing.
Delicious. All right.
Awesome. Alright, see you next time.
Sounds good. Thanks, Joel.
Yeah,
Thanks,
bye.
everybody.
Thank you for listening to the Krav Maga Worldwide podcast. To access additional resources, read show transcripts, or to submit your questions and topic suggestions for future episodes, visit kravmaga.com/podcast.